I want to touch on a bit of news that actually really rocked your world this morning, and is near and dear for us both at NBC Sports. But a little bit of shakeup in the booth. Obviously, we know that Dale Jr. is not going to be in the booth this year, and he's going over to Amazon and Warner Brothers in 2025. But an interesting move being done where post-Olympic break, Leigh Diffey will serve as the play-by-play guy. Not entirely sure for the amount of races, and I believe this is still just a report, hasn't been confirmed just yet. But I know that you have some thoughts about this, Zach. So I'll kind of let you take the floor here. What are your thoughts here on Leigh Diffey getting another shot with stock car racing?
It's Christmas in March. I can't believe it. It literally.
I'm so giddy about this, man.
I was, dude. Literally, I mean, NBC came back to NASCAR in 2015, and I think at that point we're looking at who they chose to be in the booth, and I liked quite a few of them. You had Jeff, Steve, and then Rick Allen leading, and I just, it didn't really hit me personally with what Rick was bringing to the booth. I feel like there was some strengths there that I felt like could have been improved on, and just every year I tried to look for that improvement. But at the same time, you're watching IndyCar, and for Formula One for a little bit, Leigh Diffey was just killing it, and I love the torque in his voice and just how he would sell a story. And he's a historian of basically every motorsport somehow. If you think of sports car racing, open wheels, two wheels, and even stock cars, like he really does pay attention to every motorsport, and then just worldwide sports with what he does with Olympics and particularly track and field. He just knows how to bring that audience, and he knows how to elevate a moment and make it feel like it's a big deal. Like, it can be a very minute thing. It can be one driver passing another. We saw it on Sunday in IndyCar. That wasn't the best race, but any moment, any pass that happened, he's like, oh, look at here. He's going up the inside. He's got the pass on him coming out of the turn 4. You're like, wow, you got me. What happened? That was for 17th
jacked up for a pass for 15th, man. I mean, Jesus.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think can benefit every single motorsport, because Leigh doesn't tell you what is happening. He tells you why it's happening. So two guys will be racing for position really hard. And instead of just saying, I'm not saying, Rick did this every time, but he'll just go, oh, he's onto the back bumper to the inside, and he completes the pass. Now, like Leigh would say, oh, his contract is up at the end of the year. He's on a 2-year winless streak. And I spoke to him on Friday, and he said, Leigh, it's time for me to start making moves and being aggressive. And he is making those moves right now. The time is now. And all of a sudden, like, you don't know who these guys are, right? But now you know exactly why that guy is running hard and why he's making the moves that he's making, because oh, he might be out of a job next year. Like, he spoke to him on Friday and he said, now's the time for me to get aggressive. So, and that just comes out of nowhere. That'll be the middle of the race, and he'll just spit out this huge, compelling story that makes you understand why something is happening. So, and he's done that in every motorsport. And he did a few cup races back in 2017, and I was hooked. I loved, hearing, just how he elevates the series overall. And this was great news. Rick is a great guy. He was in a documentary I did last year on the NASCAR IndyCar crossover. Great guy. He's got a great voice. And he's still doing the Xfinity series. But overall, I think this is tremendously huge for the sport. I think Leigh's going to bring it to a new audience. He's going to captivate people who've maybe never been captivated by a NASCAR race, because he's got that genetic skill to bring people together who've like, anytime I watch the Olympics, I don't know a lot of these runners, but literally when they're on the starting grid, he's able to sell each guy, what country they're from, what school they went to, how much buildup they have. Like this guy, he's the one who everyone's talking about. And that's something that not everybody has. So this was tremendous news. As you said, coming after the Olympics, not sure which race that would be, or if it's going to be throughout the entire season through the playoffs. We know IndyCar ends basically as the playoffs begin. So I feel like the schedule would be open a little bit there. But with Dale out, that was a loss. I think having Leigh in there, NBC was like, we got somebody here who's able to bring that intensity and that enthusiasm and that professionalism and all of that. Just there's nothing that's going to be lost. It's just going to be a lot of gains and something that NASCAR needs, because just one more point, I feel like most people watch NASCAR and they just feel like it's that stereotypical type of fan base, and it's just drivers kind of going around. Visually, it's not as compelling as an IndyCar or an F1, even though the competition and the statistics prove otherwise. Visually, it's just a different type of show. So to have someone like him to tell you why this is a big deal, why this is fascinating, that's going to be very beneficial. So great news. I cannot wait until after the Olympics and watch him soar.
Yeah, he's beaming over there. Really,
right?
I know, dude. Yeah, hey, look, it is exciting, and I remember those couple of races that Leigh did. Was it 2017? Was it that long ago? He
He did
doing
Michigan and Watkins Glen. I think it was just those two.
Yeah, and that's back before I even really kind of knew who Leigh Diffey was. And you hear this accent, and you're like, "Who's this guy calling NASCAR races?" Right?
Right.
But he is a rock star, and like you said, versatile at virtually anything that he calls motorsport, Olympics, and he does captivate those stories that you might not need to know, but it's like, here's why you should know, right? And I really love that point that you make, because when races do get strung out and when they do get tired and boring from a fan perspective, like, you need to be able to find those spots that can kind of inject that energy back into it, or try and set something that really wouldn't get sold in like a normal race, but just from the complexion of it, you got to be able to really find those moments, because those moments are what's going to save a broadcast, right? And it just allows for a little bit more conversation and a little bit more intrigue. So definitely was surprised to hear that this was going to happen. But again, like you said, I think that it is a really good move that you really don't lose much. And again, to have the two voices of Rick and Leigh there kind of split time, I think is going to be a positive move. And I certainly think that understanding Leigh and what he does on the IndyCar side of things, and obviously the sports car side of things, he's going to continue to bring that to NASCAR. And I certainly think that, especially post Olympics, it really kind of reignites that, loss over those last couple of weeks for NASCAR, and bringing it into, of course, the playoffs. And obviously one of the more probably the most it is the most pressure cooker part of the season, pre-playoffs, and then getting to it. So, again, still reported, but nonetheless, I mean, it was reported by the Sports Business Journal, I saw. So I think we're just kind of waiting to get that information, but definitely an interesting move there to put him in.
Yeah, and I am curious how he is going to fit in with the other guys in the booth, right? Because I think a lot of what works with Leigh is what works with Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe. They're very analytical people, incredibly smart. Of course, they raced for decades in open wheel racing, and Leigh's able to kind of feed off of them and have his own personal perspective as just an overall sports professional. And I think going back to even to the Formula One booth when F1 was on NBC for a little bit, Steve Matchett, he worked in F1 as I believe a mechanic, and he was just tremendously analytical. He was able to go down every little technical innovation that happened, and that really worked well with the Leigh. And then they had David Hobbs, who comes from a totally different era from back in the 60s and 70s. He ran with McLaren, and he ran the Indy 500 for a while. And to me, Jeff Burton's not that old, but he does come from a different type of era. the 90s and the early 2000s, he was killing it in Cup. And I think I sense that similar type of kind of back and forth with a Steve Letarte, who definitely brings that technical side, and then a Jeff who comes from that type of era behind the wheel. And then Leigh, who I think, even though he hasn't done a lot of NASCAR, he understands the culture and how it stands out from every other motorsport on the planet, especially American motorsports. So I think those three will work really well together.